All right, there's still some people joining, but we're going to go ahead and kick off, make sure we have enough time for Q&A after the presentation. So good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning for Berkeley Earth's monthly press briefing for our May 2025 temperature update. I'm Kristen Sisner, Executive Director of Berkeley Earth, and joining me on this morning's call are Robert Rohde, Berkeley Earth's Chief Scientist, Zeke Housefather and Devin Rand, both research scientists with Berkeley Earth. And I also want to recognize and thank Kate Viscara, who helps set all of this up and makes the running of this presentation possible. So next slide. So just a quick introduction about Berkeley Earth before we get started with the report. Berkeley Earth is an independent 501c3 nonprofit climate science research organization. We are based in California, but we are a fully remote global team. Our mission is to make climate data and climate science open and accessible. And in the service of that mission, we produce independent, high-resolution data products, and we work with local communities, researchers, governments, and the private sector in order to enable data-driven and evidence-based climate decision-making. Next slide, please. A quick note, the data and analysis that you will see in today's presentation was made using Berkeley Earth's high-resolution surface temperature data set. This product is available at a 1/4 degree by 1/4 degree of resolution. We provide off-the-shelf subsets for more than 8,000 global cities. We also make national TMIN and TMAX data sets available off the shelf as well, but we do offer custom products by request. All of these products are currently updated on a monthly cadence, and I think the form to request access was just made available in the chat. Just a couple more quick housekeeping notes before we get started with the presentation. This call is being recorded, and a recording will be sent out and made available later this week. We will have a live Q&A after the presentation, and we invite you to put your questions in the Q&A box. We will do our best to answer as many of those as possible, either live or in the chat box directly. And finally, a link to the May 2025 report will be made available in the chat at the end of the presentation. So I think that's my quick intro. And with that, I will go ahead and pass to Robert to start the presentation. Robert, I think you're muted.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so welcome everyone. For our May temperature report, we found that May 2025 was the second warmest analysis, so the second warmest since 1850. 1.33 degrees centigrade or 2.4 degrees Fahrenheit above the 1850 and 1900 average. This is, quite fairly warm for a May, but it's actually sharply cooler than what we saw in April. So this is what you're seeing right now is the averages of every May since 1850. If I switch to display now, showing individual months since 1980. So you can see at the end the transition from April 2025, which was a bit less, slightly less than 1.5 C, to where we are now at May. And that was, quite a bit of a drop. We're potentially seeing the end of this 2023-2024 warm event and the return towards a more neutral or typical state along the long-term warming trend. Here again, each line is a year, and we're showing the months. And you can see the monthly series as we dip down from April to May. We're still the second warmest above 2024, and below 2024, above 2023, but moving downward, which is not an uncommon feature as we come out of the sort of northern hemisphere winter months in towards northern hemisphere summer. We tend to dip down a bit. We did not really do that in 2023 and 2024, but it would not be uncommon to do so. This is also the first month of the past 12 months where we've been below 1.5 C, with the sort of canonical benchmark target for the Paris Agreement. The last time that happened was in May 2024, which you can see here was also a bit below 1.5 C. And we sort of expect that we will move along in this intermediate space below 2024 and 2023 for the rest of the year. Maybe not quite as cool as we are now, but probably sort of above the previous years, except for those last two very warm ones. So let's talk a little bit more detail about May 2025 and how it shaped up around the world. As I said, it was globally the second warmest May since 1850, a little bit behind May of last year. It concluded the second warmest of the Northern Hemisphere spring, March to May period. Third warmest for ocean temperatures. And if you look in the spatial patterns, most of the Earth is fairly warm compared to long-term expectations. There are some notable things to point to. The marine heat wave around the United Kingdom was the warmest on record. We also have considerable warmth around the Middle East. Iran set a monthly record for the second time in a row. We also have some unusual cooling in Eastern Europe, in India. This sort of cool medium patch across Asia is corresponding to a bit of cooling relative to April. And in fact, much of Asia cooled relative to April, contributing to the declining land averages. I would also call a little bit of attention to the Central Pacific, which is not doing much at the moment. This is regarded as a neutral condition. If anything, it's a little bit cooler than the average ocean condition at the moment, but not cool enough to be classified as a La Nina event. Also, there's a little bit of cooling, certainly relative to recent years, in the Northern Hemisphere parts of the Atlantic, where hurricanes develop, initial phase of hurricane development out in the Eastern Atlantic. There is, however, significant warmth more closer to the coast. So we'll have to see how that develops over the year. Here is a map showing which parts of the world were warmest or near record warm, and which parts were, locally their coldest or near record cold. As one might expect, there's only very few spots of cool conditions. There are about 4% of the Earth had record warm conditions, with the marine heat wave off the UK being one of the most significant places of that. However, we do have an unusual cool anomaly to talk about this year, this month. In central India, India as a whole was relatively cool in May. In parts of India around Maharashtra and southwest Madhya Pradesh had the coolest May in 100 years. Shown here is a time series for May average temperatures in a particular city in Maharashtra. You see quite a large negative excursion. This is probably mostly due to weather variability, a chance event, and we still get some chance events giving us cooling, but this is unusual, and therefore I would note its existence. I would also note that India as a whole had record high rainfall in May, according to the Indian Meteorological Department. And they considerably had significant thunderstorm activity, more than is typical for May, and had an early onset to this year's monsoon. So those factors contributed to relatively cool conditions in this May. So turning our attention to the land averages. So the land was cooler than it was in last year, 2024. It was also cooler than some of the other years in the last decade or so, placing nominally about fifth, with some uncertainty, some wiggle room due to the uncertainties in those measurements. But sort of closer to the long-term average of May's, but considerably cooler than one might have expected. And again, looking at the change from April to May, we had a sharp cooling event, pulling it down about 0.6 C relative to April. And I would note here that Mays tend to be a bit cooler among months compared to the winter months. So when you show all of the plots like this, it tends to plot a bit on the low side, Mays in general, but this is still a significant drop down. The ocean was the third warmest for May, behind 2024 and 2023, at close to 1 degree Celsius above the pre-industrial average, the 1850 to 1900 average. And about 5% of the ocean surface had a locally record warm May average. Again, looking at the month-to-month variations for the recent period, you can see a clear declining trend. So we had a peak in 2023 and 2024 associated with the strong El Nino event, which has since dissipated. We are in neutral conditions now following a brief and weak La Nina. And we are the last 2 months below the long-term trend line. Further short-term cooling in the ocean is probably fairly likely, as we sort of bounce around a more neutral condition in the near-term future. Speaking of El Nino and La Nina, which we describe as ENSO together, the Central Pacific is a little bit cool compared to the global ocean at present, but not so cool as to qualify as La Nina events, sort of the 0.5 degree threshold. So we're bouncing around in neutral conditions, slightly on the low side. Right now, the Climate Prediction Center at NOAA expects that we will continue at neutral conditions throughout the summer into the fall, and roughly equal chances of neutral or La Nina towards the end of the year, a return to La Nina. The chance of El Nino is a bit less than 15%. Seems somewhat unlikely at this point. The chance had been higher earlier in the year, but probably we bounce around in sort of a neutral or La Nina state for the rest of the year, which in turn means we don't really expect a lot of short-term warming during the rest of this year. So right now, we have a forecast indicated by the green line on here for what the rest of 2025 may end up looking like. We think there's roughly a 6% chance that 2025 could get warm enough to be a record warm year. That's a reduction from our previous forecast, mainly because of the cooling we saw this month, but also because of the reduced odds of a La Nina event. Reduced odds of an El Nino event possibly developing the rest of the year. There's about even odds that ends up being the second or third warmest year overall. Roughly 50% for the second warmest year and roughly 45% for the third warmest year, with very low odds of it being any cooler than the third warmest overall. And we expect that there's a roughly 40% chance that this year will again be warmer than 1.5 C above the long-term average. So just to wrap up a bit, this shows the 12-month moving average of temperature, as well as the long-term trend. In terms of the 12-month moving average, we hit a peak from what was fairly exceptional warmth in 2023 and 2024 with El Nino and likely other contributing conditions. We suspect that we are now moving past that record warmth, that we're now heading towards a more neutral condition in the long term, something closer to the long-term trend. And that this year, and maybe even a few years following it, may end up much closer to that long-term trend. However, we should note that long-term trend is already 1.4 C above the pre-industrial level, and it's rising by at least 0.2C a decade. So what was an exceptional year in 2023 and 2024 will become, sort of a normal or a middling year only a decade from now. We are, rapidly rising, and year-to-year variability doesn't change that. It just sets a little bit of, extra noise and variation that we have to deal with. But the long-term trend of global warming is continuing. The full report for May, including additional graphics and materials, should now be available live on our website. You can see the link there or scan in the QR code. And we'll be happy to take some questions now from the Q&A. And yeah.